Welcome, everyone, to another community conversation. My name is Sylvie Richards. I am a trust and estates attorney in New York City. In my practice, we meet up with a number of practitioners who are in my orbit and who offer important services to my clients. And so, in these community conversations, I want to introduce you to some of these people. So, today I am speaking with Sonya Weisshappel, who is the owner and founder of Seriatim Inc. She is also the author of a memoir called Confessions of a Chaos Whisperer, which she has transformed into a new system called the Chaos Whisperer System, which is a proactive means of helping clients with their tangible assets, turning them from chaos into clarity. So today, Sonya and I are going to be talking about your stuff, all of the things that you need to be thinking about, both for your life now and also for estate planning purposes. So welcome, Sonya. It's a
Aw,
pleasure to speak with you.
thank you. You know, stuff is a favorite conversation. And since that is where our world collides, all the issues come down to the objects.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about Seriatim.
So I started it 32 years ago when I couldn't write a resume with my dyslexia. And I just decided to start a company. Who knew? And at that time, when I started the company, it was about trying to match people to their stuff. If you wanted to get a job, you need to be able to find your clothes. If you want to be able to take on an arts and crafts project, do you have the supplies and the place to do it? So matching intention with object in the space and keeping people safe. Over time, clutter, paper, and then relocations and all the logistics that are involved in management of people's lives. And then we really built a specialty in tracking people's stuff and the logistics that inevitably come with life changes.
And is this now part of the Chaos Whisperer system? And if so, what are the biggest hurdles that you see that people have with managing their tangible assets?
That is a loaded question for both of us, isn't it? So, but really, people, it is part of the Chaos Whisperer system. The Chaos Whisperer system for me has come into place in the last couple years primarily because we've spent these decades cleaning up the messes people have made at the time of their demise or aging to illness to demise. Why not get ahead of it? So the Chaos Whisperer is to work with the trusted advisors to get them everything they need from the trenches, to allow the trusted advisors to stay in their desk and do the work that they're best suited for while we venture out into people's lives and collect so that those objects or knowledge of those objects and paperwork and everything is handed over to the trusted advisor so that when you ask a question, it's not a guess.
Now, one of the issues as an estate planning attorney that I face is determining someone's mental capacity. And one of the indices of good mental capacity is knowing the extent of your assets. not just real estate and financial assets, but also your tangible personal property. So when would you advise that someone do an inventory?
I really, in my fantasy, want people to do their inventory as they adult. I think it is something that always is to grow and to change as you go through these life changes. But if you are getting married and joining households, what is premarital and what is not is one of the first points at which, if it's not done, and God forbid there's a problem in the marriage, there's a little bit of a problem about proving whose was premarital and whose wasn't. So at the time of getting married, in a prenup, it would be lovely to put an inventory. People don't do that. That's my mission with Chaos Whisperers, to make that happen. But if you get along the way of people's lives, before they take care in the home, there must be an inventory. There must be.
You know, it reminds me of this wonderful line in the movie When Harry Met Sally, when Harry says to Jess, Jess, be sure to put your names in all of your books, because at some point you will need to know whose book this is, right?
True.
and so even when it comes to collections, I have some people who have over time accumulated collections, and as I work with them to move those collections into revocable living trusts, for instance, what is required in order to do that is a specialized inventory and appraisal. Is this something that you can help clients with?
Absolutely. First and foremost, it's organizing to make sure that one can find all that belong to that collection. And there are many types of collections, because most people think of collections as art on a wall or sculpture, but there are collections of watches, purses, jewelry, trinkets, whatever it might be. So making sure all of those are together, cataloging them, measuring them, matching up what you have receipts for, what you have appraisals for, double checking that the appraisals are actually within the last 5 years. You wouldn't go to a doctor and ask for a diagnosis without current blood work. Why would it be different in a understanding your risk and you're making financial decisions without the current blood work of your assets? Because how can you do the best job for someone without knowing the numbers related to what their collection is in totality worth? It makes problems.
And I find, so when you speak of specialized collections, I have seen all kinds of things. So for instance, I have a client who had a very specialized collection in opera memorabilia, and he also collected baseball memorabilia.
Okay.
And those, of course, have to be appraised by different people, right?
Of course, specialists.
Yes, yes. And when it comes to, and oftentimes I think people don't think about this, but when you are doing an inventory and you find, for instance, that people have heirloom watches or family silver or stamp collections, what is your advice for those types of heirlooms? and collections?
Legacy objects, collections, are a blind spot in generational wealth. They are 100% something that has always just been there. And it's just assumed that it is going to be passed along the family tree. That is a beautiful thing. That is a wonderful thing. However, if there is no claiming that that was a premarital asset, no protection properly with appraisals for insurance purposes, and you might have a problem with your structure, fire, flood, tree, something, you're at risk for not being able to get the value. It is no different at the time of an estate. That object needs to pass along with the right value, holding the right value. But they're really, people are blind to them because it's just always there. So it's part of their world, but it's tangible, and they just assume that everyone knows, but actually some of those things sneak up and are more valuable than anyone would have thought.
So one of the stories that you tell in your book is the pig story, so which I think is a perfect illustration of what you've just been talking about. So do you want to tell everyone about that story?
Well, I'd love to, because it's so common. You've got a family, they have had a gorgeous life, they have all of these items around them that show a life well lived. They are making a decision to scale down, and it's decision making. It's death by 1,000 decisions, and they have to choose. Do I like that Tupperware? Do I like that phone? Do I like that lamp? Do I like that curtain? Everything. Thousands of decisions. And they get overloaded. I mean, we help make categories and then get into it to try to minimize that. But the pig story comes from an older couple downsizing, making thousands of decisions, but their personalities come out because one person in the couple is adamant that something is very valuable, which happened to come from her family, and that things that belong to her husband, not as valuable. And so her things are for sure going to be sold, and his things can be donated. Well, arbitrarily making such decisions is not the way to go. And so we had a little bit of an arm wrestle over that, and I won. And I got the appraiser to look at both sides of what should be donation in her mind and what should be sold. And ultimately, his something was worth more than her something. And that was the pig. It was a tchotchke that sat on the desk, and she's like, oh, just donate it. And lo and behold, I just see his little face, older man, beam with kind of like a little bit of a, like he won. So it's just funny. And they made a lot of money that if we had done what they asked to do, they would have gotten a $500 deduction. Or you put tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. Which one is more valuable? I think the money in the bank at that point.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point, because when it comes to stuff, from an estate planning point of view, there are really three buckets. So there are bequests, there are lifetime gifts, and then there are donations to charity. So, and those buckets are dependent upon timing and valuation. So when it comes to bequests, those are things that are going to pass on to specified people after a person dies. When it comes to lifetime gifts, those are usually passed on at times of celebration like weddings and graduations. Somebody is going to get something special, right, from grandma or whoever. When it comes to charitable donations of tangible assets, that can be a little bit more complicated. So, when I work with clients who have valuable, tangible assets that they want to gift to a charity, we work then during the person's lifetime um, with the charity, and we enter into a donation contract, which will specify the terms and the purposes and also any restrictions that may be placed on that gift so that the parties are aligned and the donor intention is honored. Also, donations of tangible personal assets like art or antiques or cars or collectibles to a charity can qualify for an estate deduction. But again, that's nuanced. So if the charity uses the gift for its exempt purpose, then a qualified fair market value deduction can be taken. If, however, the charity decides to sell the item, then the deduction is limited to the donor's cost basis, which is
Oh,
different.
yeah, very
And
much so.
absolutely. And in order to qualify for a deduction of over 5,000 for anything over $5,000, there has to be a qualified appraisal done. So it becomes essential for estate planning purposes that a qualified inventory and appraisal of tangible assets be done.
And you bring up so many good points, and frankly, it all comes down to that knowledge. But when, first of all, the idea of working with an institution to establish the gift prior to death is very helpful, because we've been in many a situation where the executor says, well, that is to go to that museum. And it's like, and who shall we contact, dear executor? And they say, I don't know. No one's contacted him. It's like, well, do we even know they want it? And
Right.
oftentimes they don't, because
Right.
the arrangements weren't made. So that, kudos to that. And that's a very important thing. In the donation of items, there are many layers to donations, and grouping items and making those choices as to whether or not it's better to take a deduction or a piddly fee for pennies on the dollar for a sale of an item. Some, based on the tax scenario, it might be advantageous to take a deduction where it could be larger than what you would put money in your pocket from a sale of an item. But having no clarity on that when one needs to clear up an estate is really challenging. And often, and this is your world, but a company is sent out, an appraiser is sent out to establish a state valuation of the space. Those are often with a line in the metaphorical sand of no items, don't look at items above that are not above 5,000 or items not above 2,500. So everything below that line, which is most things in most people's homes, is ignored. So then when the family comes together and they're trying to equitably distribute and there's no values on anything, that's when the fights begin.
Yes. Yes.
From my experience, because
Yes.
it's, well, I want that lamp. Well, no, mom gave me that lamp. Well, the lamp's worth $500. No, it's not. It's worth 100. Well, who's to say? Unless an appraiser comes in and says so. But the appraiser 30 years ago say so is not what it really is, which goes back to the blood work of it. So it's a snowball effect, and to do appraisals is an expensive ordeal at times. And
Yes.
so what we have found works for our clients is to get it organized, get it inventoried, choose from what is within the inventory needs to be appraised, like the items you mentioned that are going to be passed along. Those need to be appraised because that's part of the gift. I'm giving you these lamps and they're worth this, so that is your gift. That is important, but appraisers don't organize. They don't want to do every Tupperware, every pot, every earring. They want to look at the things that they want to look at to put value to. So it's a very good balance of having an organizer sort that out and then overlaying the appraiser so that they're doing a quick hit of what needs to be dealt with, whether it's the watches or the coins or the stamps or the lamps or the art. They're just coming in and dealing with what they need to do, and then they're leaving and putting prices to that versus having to dig for it in the backs of closet and missing it.
Well, and that's such an important point, because oftentimes when I'm reviewing old wills, for instance, what I see is clauses that say, I leave it up to my executor to distribute property to my heirs and assigns. How is that person to know? This is always my question. And without being specific and without placing a value, a person could be given, for instance, the pig in your story and not appreciate the value of that item. And oftentimes, an item that might have sentimental value also can have a real value. And it may not have been appreciated during the donor's lifetime. But again, when we're dealing with bequests and we're dealing with charitable donations, it is so important to have a real value, a number assigned to that. And even at times a picture is very important, because a pearl earring without a description is, it could vanish. And so many times what happens is that if we have an inventory, say we have an estate contest and we have an inventory, the family may not know that an inventory was taken, right? But items, as you know, have a tendency to walk. Yes. They have a tendency to disappear. Yes. And so when we have an appraisal and we have pictures and we have descriptions, then we can claw back those items if need be. Because it's difficult even for a court to determine whether an item still belongs to the estate if it has a deemed, meaning it left during the donor's lifetime, or if it has been pilfered.
Very hard. I do. That is a bane of existence, and we work with a lot of home health agencies to make sure that as they sign a new client to take care in the home, that we're offered as a way to go in and establish a baseline of what exists so that their insurance and their liability, but also the client's peace of mind that, oh, these things all exist. And then the clients need to make a determination. I think it's time that we remove mom's wedding ring from the house while she's receiving 24-hour care and not socializing and needing to show it. So it's like it gives fodder for intelligent, mindful decisions around what you care about and what you honor and what you want to preserve. Because you also mentioned the giving of things. That's the legacy passing. And often, if you just keep kicking that object or gently passing that object, to the next generation, and they receive it and put it up or place it, but they don't actually appreciate it, like you said, they don't know the magnitude of its value. They didn't put it on their insurance 9 out of 10 times. They don't have an appraisal for it. That happens more when there is one error. And it's just there's no contention. Everything just goes to the one error. They just absorb it. But if your family had $1 million worth of coverage and you sold 800,000 and you kept 200,000, your insurance for your property might need to go up to accommodate that. And that's where the problems begin. It's a circle. You gotta, somewhere in the whack-a-mole, you're gonna have to fix that problem. And if you don't, you're gonna pay some dumb taxes at the end of life.
Well, I think that we've shown everyone how much stuff matters and how much an appraisal and evaluation matters when it comes to tangible personal property. I want to thank you so much, Sonya, for this conversation that has been illuminating and informative. And I want to invite our listeners to please contact us. If you have questions or concerns about your stuff, if you want to discuss appraisals, valuations, estate planning, we are here to provide high-touch services for you and your family, and we would welcome working with you. So thank you so much, Sonya.
Thank you so much, Sylvie. And also, I want to remind everyone that one of our favorite learning experiences, both of us as institutional knowledge, are the problems that people bring us. And when people have problems, they often feel shameful. And the reality is that the distance between feeling that you've got this weight around you versus speaking to your trusted advisors honestly about what's happening will be the shortest distance to the solve. So bring it on. Tell us the stories. It is unlikely that you would faze either of us with whatever mess someone has created. That's what I know. We learn from them. So thank you.
Thank you so, so much.